All right, Jarrett. I know we're supposed to aim at doing small talk for a bit, but I'm just really interested deep down in the perspective of a city. Um, it's like we've partnered with and worked with architects, developers, GCs, kind of on the other side of the table. People trying to get a deal together, trying to turn it into a project, so we can build a building. Um, what is it like being on the other side of the table? Like, what are you worried about
Yeah,
when developers come in the room?
I appreciate that, Clifton. So coming from a municipality can help ground this for some of the folks on the call. I'm in Upper Merion Township, which is a little bit outside of Philadelphia, about 30 minutes outside of Philadelphia. And we're better known by our colloquial name, King of Prussia. But the governmental entity that comprises King of Prussia is Upper Merion Township. And something that I know we've had the chance to kind of talk about is when we're looking at our different zoning districts, we're really looking at the long term. We want to be good fiscal stewards to our community to make sure that the core things are able to continue, which is making sure, the lights stay on, that critical infrastructure is alive, and that also, we're able to have a good base of public safety, which requires a good tax base. And so, when we're looking at new developments that are coming in, it's really twofold. It's what is this going to do to our overall built environment within a specific zoning district? And then what is that going to do to our fiscal base? And is that the right fiscally smart decision for us to be making to be that good steward, not just for that deal to get done, but many years into the future?
Yeah, I'm gonna just jump right in. All right, how cities bridge policy and development, site planning AI. Everybody, I've got Jarrett Lash here, Township Planner for Upper Merion Township. We said it's up in Pennsylvania. And I'm Clifton Harness, co-founder and CEO here at TestFit. We'll talk a little bit, about software and how TestFit has enabled Jarrett to do a bit more than just his regular job by leveraging TestFit. Um, so talking about tax base, like it it's obviously like a 50-year effort, or like you're not trying to fix everything right now today, but you've got long-term goals.
Yeah, absolutely. So to give some additional context for folks about Upper Merion, we're pushing about 38,000 residents, but every day we have about 65,000 employees come into our community. We're 3.58% of the county's landmass. The county's made up of 62 municipalities. We're like 3.5% of it, but we have about like 15% of the office and retail here in our township, and that's comprised of the county's largest office park, Moore Park, which was an industrial park, became an office park in the 1970s, and then now is kind of modernizing more into a mixed-use district. And then we also have the third largest mall in the country, the King of Prussia Mall, which is really our major destination for folks coming in. And so one thing that we're seeing right now in a post-COVID environment is a number of tax appeals against our commercial real estate base, specifically commercial offices. And that's a hit. Every single time a rateable goes down, then our millage isn't as effective against that property. And so we've had the benefit of that super strong office sector for a long time, but that might not be the case for the next 30 years, like you said, Clifton. So we're taking a look at mixed use. How does that interact with it? But obviously that comes with a lot of questions from our elected officials, from our residents, and what is that going to look like? How is that going to feel? And are we being a good steward that is building the built environment that we're hoping for our community to look like and feel like for that next 30 years of that growth phase?
And so you've got not a whole lot of land and a whole
Right.
lot of people coming. And so like low density housing is probably not going to solve you'll see the transient population that comes in by day as a problem. Do you want to have like parity between, jobs and roofs, or, how are y'all thinking about entitlements for, I don't know, housing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that right now our multifamily absorption rate is incredibly high. I mean, our vacancy for new products is sitting at like 2 to 3% just a few months after a new product comes online. So like there's room to grow in the residential market. That's not unique to Upper Merion. I mean, that's the case for the Philadelphia metropolitan area. That's the case for so many MSAs across the country, that there's room to grow for more housing. And so, we are looking strategically, how can we get more workforce housing into the community. But we also know, increased units also just helps the overall supply. We can't be the sole part of it, right? But we could be one piece of it, to try to add more.
You can entitle some stuff to be the sole part of it if you want to.
Yeah. We try. And I think what's interesting is we're seeing a number of products coming into our community that we would not have had built. Like to your point about the low density, obviously single family home tract housing, we're having one piece getting kind of finished right now. And it's really the last tract that's going to be single family homes in terms of, a large subdivision getting built. But we are starting to see the Texas donut that you know so well, right? The wrapped multifamily around a structured parking garage that's starting to come into our community a lot more because we're seeing our land values get to the point that it can make some fiscal sense for a developer to come in and invest in that structured parking, to amortize out the cost of the land as effectively as possible. But a
Well,
lot of,
let's talk
yeah,
about like your first sort of case study here.
yeah.
Tell me about this parcel and kind of how you were looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a recently subdivided parcel. In the back of it is somewhere that has, been a long-standing kind of R&D lab for material sciences. And so they came in, they subdivided this about 10-acre parcel that was really just kind of a grassy field with some older office buildings still remaining in the front. And so, when I think as a planner, what does it look like for how these places are going to evolve? I want to make sure that I'm giving both our elected officials and our residents really actionable things to see. I always like to start any zoning text amendment from the place of how do we want this place to look and feel? And then, allow us to get that feedback from the elected officials, from the residents, and try to construct a zoning text amendment that's going to achieve that, right? And so I took a look at this parcel and was like, okay, if multifamily was proposed on it, we used to have it. Our dwelling units per acre used to be 45 dwelling units an acre. And that's what you see modeled in front of us right here. At 45 dwelling units an acre, we heard from a lot of developers, that was like the financial sweet spot where things worked for them very well. And some particularities of this site is it needs to maintain access to the rear, for fire apparatus access. So, you can kind of see that split between those two buildings. TestFit was really easy. I just drew my road in there, gave me two separate buildings, plugged in 45 dwelling units an acre, ran the generative design, came up with these. And I'm like, yeah, that's reflective of our zoning, that meets our green space coverage, our impervious coverage. It takes me 4 minutes to be able to do that. And so this is the 45 dwelling units an acre, just to kind of like understand what that looks like for folks.
So you did a couple. Okay,
Yeah.
so here's what is
So
this?
now
This
our
is
now our
30-ish?
zoning's down at 30 dwelling units an
30.
acre. So like we can model that as well, right? What does that look like? And when I look at these two from an aerial perspective, from a built environment perspective, there's not a huge difference in kind of like the visual impact, I think, between like the 45 dwelling units an acre to the 45. Obviously, one's bigger, right? But it's not a huge precipitous change. Just the number of levels, kind of the overall coverage that it has differs a little bit. So to me, that's like a good case study, right? That's one factor. It's like, how does this look? How does this feel? Then, of course, it's like, okay, well, what is that going to mean to our storm, or for our sanitary system to have an additional, 15 dwelling units per acre in this? Let's run that. What does that mean to our roadway systems? Let's run that. So it's one piece of the puzzle to help do it. But when we can model this out very quickly to say like, okay, we're going to drop it from 45 to 30. I just tweak a few things and it comes out like this, where I'm able to, like, I could do this live in a meeting with our elected officials and be showing them the changes real time. And that's super exciting for me as a planner, where it's not, hey, I'll get back to you, but having those active conversations when we're kind of like iterating in those processes.
So did the city council like give pushback like we don't like the giant ugly parking garages, or like what's the downside to doing, I don't know, higher density?
Well, I think, with anything, it's just making sure that we're balancing those other factors. It's going to be, is this something that our sanitary system is going to be able to handle? Is this something that our roadway system is going to be able to handle? There's always questions about new housing. How is that going to affect our school systems? That's why we do have provisions that, 80% of the units need to be 1 to 2 bedrooms, can make it harder to build housing suitable for families and multifamily. But, of course, from the school district standpoint, they love the high rateable of a multifamily product, as long as it's not adding a ton of new pupils into the school system. So it's, one
Well, yeah,
factor
just
that
build
we're
just
gonna be
build
taking a
one
look at.
bedroom units then, man.
And we've seen like there's a large development that was built, and I think the statistic was for every 22 residential units in a multifamily building, we have one new student enter the school system. So it is pretty low impact, but it's
Wow.
enough funding to cover three students going in, or sometimes even more than that, based on the exact product that's being delivered.
So did you also run through like so you'd show here's the difference between like a high density structured parking
Yeah.
or, surface parking galore,
Yes.
roughly the same dwelling units to the acre. One's got what, like the is it the building coverage component that's really interesting for you guys?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Definitely something that we are focused on is making sure that we're not overburdening the built environment with asphalt. That's not necessary. Anywhere that we can have more green, the better. We are the net recipient of everybody upstream of us as that water comes down towards the Schuylkill River on our northern boundary. So stormwater is a huge deal to us. We want to make sure that we're stewarding that as appropriately as possible. And if we can be, curbing the amount of impervious coverage, but still creating the same amount of housing opportunities, like how can we be doing that? And this for me, like points really quickly to somebody to say, hey, look, we went from 47% impervious coverage down to, I think it was like 38% when we build it. When
So
we build
here, this
structure.
one's 47%, this one's 38.
Thank you. Yeah. And so, when you see that delta between the two, I'm sure a lot of the folks on the call know this if they're in the development world or they're in the architecture world. I mean, the cost of structured parking is very high, right? It's going to be like a 5x increase on a per parking space. So, if they're going to need a little more to help like incentivize them to get more towards structured parking than that. But if our goal is decreasing impervious coverage, this shows really quickly that, hey, if we switch to trying to incentivize people to build that type of structured parking. Maybe it's, minimum parking number relief. There's other mechanisms that we could take a look at. Then how can we make sure that's getting built instead? Because that meets some of the larger goals that we have of broader stormwater management for the entirety of the community.
Like stormwater management's not cheap either, right?
No,
It's like you might need a pond that's 20% the size of the site,
right.
because you're covering it with so much, surface parking.
Well, and that's something else that, TestFit does pretty well, where we could like quadrant that out. We could say, okay, this area is going to be a retention basin, run the generative design and see how it makes everything change. We could put topo to kind of see what would maybe make sense as we're modeling this out. But we are seeing a lot more underground stormwater facilities because people are trying to preserve the land for as much development capability as possible, which again kind of points towards why I think structured parking is becoming a little bit more common. But what's super cool about this is like we can take a look. We could take a look at this right here and say like, okay, does this look and feel right? Does this 30 dwelling units an acre make sense? This type of, garden urban style development. And then can we apply that really across this whole district, not just looking at this one parcel, but, I could start to easily select all those adjacent buildings, say, to the east side over towards Clark Avenue, which you can see a few of those buildings on the right-hand side of the screen. And then, use that to be able to not just look at one parcel, but really kind of envision broadly how this place could build out if we're seeing more of that type of iterative redevelopment occurring.
So between the parcels though, you guys have like a great streets initiative or walkable, like
Yeah.
how's that side of the planning effort paying off for UMT?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So something that our business improvement district did was they embarked on what ended up being about a 12-year project to build what they call the First Avenue Linear Park down First Avenue. So again, this was back in the day, this was just a industrial park, kind of redeveloped more into a standard office park in the 80s. And it was still completely disconnected. And so they really had the vision of trying to get people out of their cars, giving an amenity for bikers, for walkers, during a break, or to be able to add to our overall multimodal system that we've been doing a really good job at building out over the past 10, 20 years. But we do right now have a 25-foot common area easement that's required for any new development to be able to enable us to build this type of linear park. And you can kind of, yeah, you're exactly
So
nailing it.
like right here. So
That's
this is
exactly
about
right.
25 feet.
That's exactly right. And so when we're talking about like front yard setbacks, we're trying to decrease the front yard setback. We don't want people to have to walk through a parking lot onto the linear park and then through another parking lot to get to another destination. So if ground floor retail starts to emerge in this district, like let's decrease that trip by bringing the buildings closer to the roadway, getting a better streetscape overall, and it's not just a macadam of parking. And if we're kind of stress testing, what does it look and feel like? It's not completely perfect, but it's a really great start for us to kind of zoom in just within TestFit and see what does that linear park kind of look like with that 50-foot min setback and a 75-foot max setback, or should that be pushed back a little further? And we can play around with that to see, how does it interact with some of these other multimodal goals that we have.
Well, I mean, the problem is you make the setback too big, they'll be like, "Oh, I want to put my parking here in front of the building, and
Yes,
a lot of the goals with new urbanism are how do we pull the building mass like right up to high traffic roads so you can
correct.
define the edges of your thoroughfares with
Yes.
your buildings. Um, so I think we had one other kind of exhibit to walk through.
Yeah.
Y'all have a lot of, call it, big box retail.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously a target for, improving the tax base. Um, but how do you communicate? I mean, it's hard for Americans to conceptualize that what I've known as a strip center like could possibly be better, right? So, I mean, what's the goal here?
Yeah, Clifton, I think it's a great point. Like we're leaving a lot on the table with a lot of these. We're leaving a lot of tax revenue on the table. We're leaving job opportunities on the table. We're leaving housing opportunities on the table when we lock up parcels in amber with a lot of parking that they may not need. And so something we've been doing is going into the field, trying to understand what is the actual parking usage that we have. And so, just one big box store, for example, when we were counting during kind of peak times for that shopping center, the parking usage is ranging between 7 to 15% parked. That 85% is being left broadly untouched, maybe a little different on Black Friday. And that's not to say that our businesses aren't
Yeah.
well. They're doing incredibly well. That's why we are, so dominant as we are within this position of retail. Like we hear constantly from different big box stores that one of their highest performing, if not their highest performing store is in King of Prussia nationally. Like we do very, very well. But we're requiring a lot of parking. Our minimum parking requirements are kind of leading them in that direction. And so, one kind of thought experiment that I wanted to do just to get a local conversation going was, okay, let's take one of these big box stores and say, we only need 20% of the existing parking right now. And how can we expand that retail opportunity? Like you said, Clifton, with new urbanism principles, it's going to make it more walkable. It's going to get you out of your car. It's going to be somewhere that's going to be a centralized plaza that you could sit outside a cafe and really enjoy that built environment. Feel comfortable letting go of your kid's hand so they can walk around on their own because there aren't any cars nearby, right? That's a
That's a good
perfect
heuristic right
experience.
there.
Yeah,
Can I let go of my kid's hand in this environment?
absolutely.
I love that.
And that's the goal, right? Is to create those kind of family friendly places. And so, modeling that out, keeping what we know is a little bit above what the parking needs are, but expanding retail opportunity. Like I could model that out super quickly. Now, like there's practicality elements that would make this type of retrofit difficult. That parking is locked up in different leases. It's going to be hard to go to a tenant and say, hey, the whole front section of your parking lot is going to be, demoed while we do this great retail expansion. And you're going to love it once it's done. Like that's tough. That's tough to do from a developer standpoint. But from a built environment standpoint, we should be rewarding the opportunities to be able to do that. And if we can, move in the direction of having people see it, they understand kind of the look and feel of it, maybe we can help move in that direction that a future retrofit or a future complete rebuild of these places is going to incorporate some of those best practices. TestFit helped us do that really, really quickly. And then, it's a little cheeky, but even like dotting in the trees into this is like a fun little feature that you all provide that makes a place feel a little bit more lived in. And so,
Yeah.
taking that area between those two retail strips and saying like, what if that was tree lined? That's where people want to be. It's going to give that sunshade that invites people to stay just a little bit longer. So that's good for our
Tree,
overall canopy cover too.
trees are the I don't know, supporting actors of architecture. Um, and like if you don't have vegetation considered and landscape considered, like I haven't seen any of these deals really feel like actual, that's a good point to bring up. Like how we present it is important and how we think about space is important as well. All right, so you have the King of Prussia Mall.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like it's not gonna be a vacant mall. It's one that's successful. It has, enough velocity of people coming to it. But will that continue? I mean, how are y'all thinking about? I'm assuming it's huge. It is huge, right?
It is. I mean, third largest mall in the country. Some people say it's the first largest by retail square footage. I think we can all, take a look at different metrics and try to make a case. But without a doubt, from just a gross leasable area, it's a very large mall. It's a very dominant mall. You're down in Texas. It's like the Texas Galleria Mall. It's just a
Yeah.
strong, high performing mall. It's done some improvements in the past that have really made some big changes. Back in the 2010s, it built the connector, which connected two parts of the mall that were historically separated from each other. You can kind of think Tyson's 1, Tyson's 2 down in Virginia. It's like if you brought those two together. And all of that is a high luxury corridor. It's where Fendi, Gucci, Cartier, like those are all within the connector right now. So it kind of speaks to the market. Italy just opened up a location in it. If we have any New Yorkers on the line who like to go to Italy, and we're having the first Netflix house open up, which is Netflix foyer into a permanent brick and mortar opportunity to create experiential opportunities for folks. So, I mean, it's continuing to
We
perform
we had that. It
very
was
well.
called Blockbuster, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a little different, but it's going to be fantastic. Like the mall is continuing to be innovative, find new opportunities to make sure that it's relevant. But certainly, as time goes on, that's a huge amount of area, and also like there's a lot of surrounding parcels to the mall that right now could be envisioned in different ways that have pretty good zoning flexibility. You could build multifamily on them, hotels on them, and we can mass that all out to say, if it's not directly on the mall property, what does it look like if it's being built on the outer parcels to complement all the activity happening right at the mall?
So there's we're gonna jump into I think Q&A.
Sure.
We've got a question here. I'm curious to know how much you guys have leveraged the pro forma module, costing module,
Yeah.
the sort of cloud viewer. You share the models with people. The non-site plan parts of TestFit. What was your experience like?
That's an awesome question. And from a pro forma standpoint, there's two great uses that we have for it. First is a gut check, right? When we're making a zoning text amendment, we will have developers come to us and say, hey, listen, that's just not going to pencil out for us. And what we can do with this is when we build that, we have this rough cost, we're able to break it down as that pro forma, plug it into our own pro forma, run the numbers based on what we know for local comps, and kind of check their math and sit down with them and have like an honest conversation on like, we ran a pro forma and it's performing pretty well, truth be told, right? So like we can gut check that, but I do think we need more pro forma based planning to come in
Yeah,
and make sure that like what we're doing maths out, because if we want that built environment to occur, it has to be incentivized for a developer to want to go and go through the effort and the risk to go and build something new. So we want to make sure
yeah.
we're being good partners in that way. So we can use it in that way from a like kind of initial zoning text amendment standpoint. In terms of the long term, oh, Clifton, go ahead.
I was gonna say like the final boss of every real estate deal is finance, and like
Yeah.
you know a lot of entitlement. I mean, a lot of policy gets written with like ideals in mind, and I don't have a problem with ideals, but don't write in that you'll do 12 FAR here, like
Right.
like how are we actually going to go build that, and if your solution, and this is like I'm like complaining about Austin, it's like if your solution is that we're all going to build 30 floor towers, like you're not really bringing finance that's got to figure out how to actually make it happen to the table.
Yeah. So I think it's a great way that we can like kind of connect with each other's worlds, understand each other a little bit better. So we're making sure that policy makes sense within like the reality of trying to get stuff built. I think you're totally right. And the other way that we can look at is from a fiscal tax base. When we have the cost of construction, we can work to put that into our common level ratio and kind of estimate that if this product got built, we think that it's going to drive this amount of revenue. We're also working on studies that pretty simply say, this type of product costs us this much in services. And so we can be very smart in how we're growing. Upper Merion Township is pretty much built out. There's not a lot of raw land to take advantage of. So everything is going to be kind of shifting. The metabolic rate of development is subsiding a little bit, but going more towards the redevelopment, which means we need to be tactful. We need to be smart. We need to make sure that we're doing things that are strengthening us fiscally moving forward. And so, taking a look at the built environment is all great, but we want to make sure that's going to steward all of our infrastructure and services for the next 30 years. And when I can take a look at that cost of construction, I can very quickly plug that in to understand, okay, here's how much revenue we're going to get. Here's how much revenue we're deriving from the parcel right now. How does that delta work from us, not just from pure revenue, but also cost of service, to make sure we're moving that forward in a really meaningful and powerful way for folks.
There's one more question. What advice would you give to other city planners who want to modernize their zoning and feasibility process, but
Yeah.
don't know where to start?
I think first is get creative and look for tools. Upper Merion is a very vibrant place. I'm a planning team of one. So I need things that are going to be huge force multipliers for me to be able to respond to this. I've got a great team and amazing staff members who play critical roles across the whole spectrum. But the planning function kind of falls back onto one desk, and there's only so much I can do. Like, I could sit and sketch up and can, kind of make what these zoning changes are going to look like, but it's going to take me a full day, whereas
Yeah,
jumping to TestFit's going to take me like 15 minutes. Right. And
yeah.
it's probably going to look a lot better than what I'm going to try to do on my own. So I would just encourage any city planner to, always remember your audience. We're here to serve the public first. And any way that we can have a tool that helps the public understand what we're trying to do, that's a great tool. That's a fantastic tool for us to have. And so if you have a meeting and you're looking at a zoning text amendment and people are coming up with their own ideas of how it's going to look and feel, it's like, no, model it in TestFit and show them what it's going to look and feel like, because that can help diffuse some tension when it's real, or catch issues in the zoning text amendment to be like, whoa, that's not how we thought it was going to build out. Is that really the FAR on that building? So it's a good way to check it a few ways.
Well, I mean, you're like playing Sim City in real life, and I don't know. You get later in the game, and all of a sudden, the economic conditions are right for like skyscrapers to generate. You're like, oh, I didn't know we were that kind of city. All right, well, thank you, Jarrett, so much. Really appreciated kind of having you as a customer and learning from you. I was kind of telling you in the pre-call that like, yeah, we're trying to figure out how exactly we talk to cities and what our value is here. And so thank you for being instrumental in that. Um, you know, People listening in, you can email me or Jarrett and ask us some questions about how TestFit's working, or how do you go about even getting funding to buy a software at a city. Like that in of itself is a challenge. But a bigger challenge is paying an architect like $500,000 for a big planning package, for I don't know, entitlement work and stuff. Um, but yeah, I really appreciate having you here today, and I can't wait
Pleasure.
to get to Valley Forge and like King of Prussia Mall and CPA, man.
We're excited to have you.